Good to be back. So my name is Jamon Warren. I run a video game arts and culture company called Killscreen. We publish a magazine. We run a daily website, killscreendaily.com. I host a show for PBS Digital Studios called Game Show, which was somehow not taken on YouTube. I'm not sure how that happened. And we host a festival next month where games meet culture called 256. And we've done some brand work as well, working with GE on the launch of a game called Wonderground, a project called Soundplay, which was an interactive project between us and Pitchfork and Intel. And then we've done some content marketing and strategy for IQ, providing them stories about video games. So I think a lot about video games on a regular basis. So as I mentioned, I run a video game arts and culture company, and last year I made a proposition, which is that the future of games isn't technology, it's culture, and that games should be your R&D department, that if you look at games, you have a lens into the way things will be. And I gave a bunch of examples, like 3D technology, for example. This is a screenshot from a game called Alpha Waves, which was made in 1991. Virtual reality is a place where games have been a pioneer. This is also from 1991, although very easily could have been CES earlier this year. And then some of these things have borne out over the past year. Amazon recently acquired Twitch for about $1 billion, which I guess is kind of the going rate for acquisitions these days. And for a lot of you who probably use Slack, which is a communication and productivity tool, you'll be happy to know that Slack, in its first iteration, was actually an MMO, which was called Glitch, a browser-based MMO, and they used a lot of that technology. And actually, the founder of Slack, Stuart Butterfield, this is his second time doing this. He was a co-founder of Flickr. Flickr originally started as a feature in a game called Game Never Ending. So as you can see, I'm kind of an optimist when it comes to the future of games. I'm wearing yellow pants, after all. And then something happened last fall between PSFKs. This thing happened. How many of you know what Gamergate is? All right, cool. So Gamergate was, it originally started as like a lover's quarrel online, which then became a crusade against women in games, and then a specific crusade against women more generally, which became a lot of traffic. It kind of took over Twitter for a couple months last year. And it was kind of disappointing for me as someone who's devoted his life to games that something so terrible and toxic was coming out of this universe that I love so much. But if you go back to my original proposition that games should be your R&D department, that you can use games to be a lens towards the future, then all of a sudden this really terrible thing, Gamergate, which could be conceived as a tragedy, it's absolutely a tragedy, it ruined some people's lives, it made Twitter utterly uninhabitable for a 2-month period. We can look at it a different way. It becomes an opportunity to learn something, and I think it would be foolish to think of something as negative as Gamergate to solely be the province of angry young males on the internet. So I have 2 things I just hope that you'll learn from Gamergate and sort of generally toxic behavior online. The first is that Gamergate exposes flaws in how we communicate online. In the world of games, there's a behavior, it's called speed running. It's these people who basically either write computer programs or basically play games as quickly as humanly possible. As you can see, this person is absolutely dominating Super Mario Brothers. And there we go. So that desire for optimization, this desire to understand systems in a deeper way is something that's native to people who play games. So we shouldn't be surprised when that behavior crosses over into other arenas, like Twitter, for example. I'm sure all of you use Twitter, and I'm sure all of you know what the problems with Twitter are. Well, there's one specific one, which is that anyone around the world can basically just insert themselves inside of your conversation. So Gamergaters got really good at this. They would just, it actually became a practice called sea-lining, where they would just sort of show up in people's conversations, whether they were welcome or not. But the reality is that, for this group of folks who align themselves with Gamergate, it's a very small group. It's 0.17% of all the people on Twitter, like a sort of moderate click-through campaign for display, I guess. It's like 10,000 people, about 10,000 people were actively involved, and what it showed was that a very small group of organized people can very quickly outweigh a very large group of disorganized people. Because a lot of the social systems that we inhabit online have done away with a lot of the tools that we use to regulate public behavior. Thank goodness we're beyond using the stocks, but this is part of a long process, and you don't see these kinds of tools available in places like Twitter or on Facebook. It's usually you can block or mute or whatever. Because the reality is Gamergate sort of exposed this adage from Anil Dash, which is that if your website's full of assholes, it's your fault. The good news is that games did birth this thing into the world, but games also present a potential solution. That guy in the center, his name is Jeffrey Lin. He's the lead social systems designer for a game called League of Legends. They had about 30 million people watch their world championships last year. It's an incredibly popular game, and what Jeff's job is to design social systems to encourage people to be better. So he uses his PhD in psychology to help game players with things like priming, where they change the color of text to see if that encourages certain behavior. They do a thing called restricted chat, where it turns out if you play League of Legends and you're a really nasty person, you don't get to talk as much. Isn't that a crazy idea if that could happen in Twitter as well? As far as I know, Riot's the only game company in the world that does this. Number two, and I'll buzz through this pretty quickly. One big thing you should understand about Gamergate is that games do not equal games, do not equal games, and by extension, gamers do not equal gamers, do not equal gamers. For a long time in the early history of games, we had one category for how we understood them. It was basically teenage boys, and then sort of Angry Birds happened, and now this industry of millions of people had two categories, casual and hardcore. And then when this Gamergate stuff was happening, I found myself in an interesting position because I played games like Wolfenstein, which is one of my recent favorites, which is violent and would be associated with sort of negativity. But I'm not, I don't hate women, or I don't antagonize people online. And the same with the 30 million people who watch League of Legends. They can't all be jerks, right? So there has to be more stratification there. And so we actually have a model for thinking about what this negative behavior inside of the world of online games actually is. In soccer, there's a term for it. It's called hooligans, right? The first instance of hooliganism happened in 1885 when a team, Aston Villa, won a friendly match 5-0 against another local team. Both teams were pelted with rocks and stones, and contemporary hooliganism was born. But you fast forward 130 years, soccer is the biggest game on the planet. And when Coca-Cola and Adidas spend $50 million a year wanting to attach their name to the world of soccer, they're thinking of this, right? The beautiful game, people playing it on the beach in Brazil. They're not thinking of this, right? But this is a part of soccer culture too, but by no means would you ever say that hooliganism or soccer hooligans are representative of all the people who love soccer. And the same basically goes for games. So when we think about Gamergate and negative gamer behavior, we should understand it as part of a growing rift in terms of how we think about who people are who play games. The largest group of people who play games is actually women over the age of 18, over 30% compared to teenage boys, which is just 17%. So Gamergate was this big sort of fissure, and I hope it gives some complexity to our understanding of who it is that play games. There's all different types of people. My hope is that games have been through a lot over the last 3 decades. This was another big flare-up, which is really unfortunate. It came out of my backyard. But I hope it's just a growing pain and that games continue to grow, and maybe they'll be as big as soccer someday. All right, thank you.